So I'm going to be doing some thoughts videos every once in a while because we're getting some new news and some laws or some new news are coming out, and I just want to share my thoughts with you guys. But I'll come back to this article in just a little bit. So we have a lot of news coming out. We have a lot of uncertainty in the market about what's going to happen to the recreational marijuana industry. If the White House is going to choose to actually pursue the states for recreational marijuana, or if it's going to leave them alone and let let the process happen as it is, as it should happen. By the way, if you want like an easy place to get all these news articles, they're generally on Reddit. People just post anything that's relevant to the marijuana industry and the marijuana stocks on here. So it's a pretty good place to just kind of get all the articles that relate to the marijuana stuff right now. So we have a lot of news coming out about people supporting and not supporting the legalization of marijuana, and it creates some uncertainty in the market. Now, this uncertainty about what's going to happen in the future has been pretty heavy, has had some pretty heavy influence on the American stocks. We're seeing 20-30% drops in the past few days, which is pretty significant. And it's also had a negative effect on the Canadian stocks because the Canadian stocks will get affected by the US market as well. It's not as big, but it's still a negative effect. So a lot of people are going against, or the people that are going against the legalization of marijuana, some of them are probably still have this sentimentality about marijuana, about this whole propaganda thing that marijuana is a gateway drug and that it should not be legalized. If you look at the evidence, there's really no reason why it shouldn't be legalized. There's no real reason. Come on, let's get it straight here. So some of these people just, they can't drop that whole propaganda thing that was run in the 80s and 90s and earlier than that about marijuana being this evil thing that causes you to get on heroin and do all of that stuff. So a lot of them are against it for that reason, and a lot of them are against it probably for this reason. So Trump's secretary came out about 5 days ago and said that they're going to pursue the state's rights to legalize marijuana. And what would you know? His wife is the senior vice president for the National Beer Wholesalers Association. So that's a pretty big coincidence. We have this marijuana industry that's getting in the way of the beer industry, or at least it's having, it's going to cause the beer sales to drop a little bit because the money that's going to be spent on marijuana has to come from somewhere, and part of that money will come from the beer industry. People are not going to be spending as much on beer as they did previously if they can buy marijuana. So the beer industry doesn't want this to happen. The alcohol industry in general doesn't want this to happen. The tobacco industry doesn't want this to happen. So they are paying a lot of the people in power to at least delay this happening so they can make more profits. Which this happens in every single industry. Whenever something new comes out, the people in power don't want it to happen because they'll lose some power. So they try to prevent it for as long as possible. So a lot of these politicians, if you look into their backgrounds, you can see that they have some sort of a conflict of interest happening, and yeah, then you get to see a clearer picture. So it's not so much that they're against the whole marijuana legalization; they just don't want to lose money in their stocks because they're invested heavily into some of these beer companies or whatever they're invested into, and they don't want to lose their power. So that's that. Nobody's chasing medical marijuana right now because if you're a politician and you come out that you're against medical marijuana, then you're probably an idiot and you're not going to have a very long political career because people are for medical marijuana, and if you go against it, then you're not going to get voted back in. So don't do that. So here's my view on this. So we have the White House. Okay, let's have a hypothetical situation here. If you're a politician in the White House right now, and the White House for whatever reason decides that they will actually pursue states for legalizing recreational marijuana, and that they will actually enforce some type of penalty, if you're a politician that supports that and you want to have a political career in the future, then you're not doing a very good job, because in the future, if you're going to be running for re-election or something of that sort, and your opponent points out the fact that you were for denying states' rights, then that will be a major blow A lot of people support states' rights. A lot of people believe that if the state wants to do something, and if the people in a certain state want something, that they should be able to get it, despite the fact that the federal government might not allow it. If you have people in a small location that want something, and the country itself might not want it, then those people, or at least the way they would classify them by states, they should be allowed to get it. And a lot of people are for this idea if you explain it to them well enough. And if you're a politician and you go against that idea, then that's political suicide. So personally, I don't think that this will continue for very long. I mean, it might cause some delays in legalization in the recreational market, but I don't think that it will actually escalate to the point that people are thinking that it will escalate, because there's no way. Why would anybody in their right mind do that? That's political suicide, in my opinion. At least the way that I view it. Maybe I'm missing something. If I am, let me know. But I don't think I'm missing anything. And yeah, a lot of people are coming out and saying that they're for recreational marijuana, not so much because they actually believe in it, but because they want to buy votes. If you're for it and then you want to get reelected, then you're just going to get more votes for you, versus the guy that's not for it. The public in general is for recreational marijuana, and they're even more for medical marijuana, which is why nobody is going after medical marijuana, because if you say that you're not for medical marijuana, you're never going to get elected into any office, because that's an issue that you just can't go against anymore. Whenever like 70 or 80% of the country, even more in some polls, they agree that medical marijuana should be a thing. So come on, you can't go against that. And I think that it won't be too long before people realize this, and before this happens. Now, something interesting that I found is that California, they're going to sell about 2.2, 2.3 billion dollars in bonds. It says 2.4 on here, but on the radio today in the morning I heard slightly less. So I think that they changed the value a little bit. They've been changing it for a while, but I think it got changed again. But over $2 billion in bonds are going to be sold in California. Now, California has to pay for those bonds in the future, and I think that the reason why they're selling these bonds is partially because they're counting on the recreational marijuana market to give them a lot of taxes in the upcoming years. Because California has 38 million people, which is more than people in Canada, and California has a pretty big tourism industry. And if marijuana gets legalized, California is going to make a lot of tax money off that. Now, I don't know. I know some tax estimates put it at like a few $1 billion. I'm not exactly sure how those are done, but there will be a net increase in taxes because marijuana is going to be taxed much more heavily than some other products. So even if you still make the same income, let's say you make $100,000 a year and you spend let's say you spend $1,000 on alcohol, and let's say that marijuana gets legalized, and now you spend $500 on marijuana and $500 on alcohol. Now, alcohol, as far as I am aware, is not taxed as heavily as marijuana. So just because it's taxed heavier will mean an increase in net taxes for California. So I think that part of this $2.4 billion bond offering, part of it is relying on the fact that the recreational market in the future is going to be able to pay for it, that there's going to be an increase in taxes in the future, and that they will be able to pay for this. And they're just using the bonds to get the money sooner rather than later, which is what the government always wants to do, because why wouldn't you want money sooner than later? Money gives you a hell of a lot of power, so it only makes sense. But yeah, those are my thoughts so far. A lot of people are just coming out and saying stuff like this, but they can say everything that they want, but the question is, are they actually willing to pursue what they're saying? Because if they are, then political suicide. Also, come on. This is propaganda. I'm not sure we're going to get better, healthier nation if we have marijuana being sold at every store corner. Like, really? Like, are we not we would probably not be a better nation if alcohol wasn't sold at every single store corner or grocery store corner. But that's not. Nobody's talking about that. Alcohol actually has some negative consequences for people that drink too much of it. So, yeah. These statements, if you have any sort of a brain, that might be a little bit harsh, but come on, people. Really? And if you have any sort of a brain, and I am going to be harsh, but this is pure propaganda. Come on, you should. I'm hoping that the majority of people are going to be able to see through this and see just the complete BS that this is, and that this is not really anything. It just appeals to the feelings of some people and doesn't do anything better. So I'm hoping that people will see through this and that things will continue as they currently are. But those are my thoughts. Hopefully they help somewhat in establishing what is currently happening. And let me know in the comments, or I don't know. Let me know in the comments. Subscribe if you can, and that's it.